Hi y'all, my name is Brooke and I'm here to welcome you back to Band Brooke, and today I am going to be talking to you about The Institute by Stephen King. Now, I have never read any of his books before. I have watched and loved the old and new It. I have watched television shows like Haven that are based off of his body of work, in that case, more specifically The Colorado Kid. But I've never picked up any of his books, which is weird because I love thrillers and horror. But I am in a book club that is going to be reading this, and that was the perfect incentive to pick this up. And I'm really glad I did because this made me want to do a deep dive into the rest of Stephen King's canon. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the synopsis for this book, what really worked for me and what didn't, and I will leave all the spoilers till the end so you can decide whether or not this is something that you might want to pick up. If you love Stephen King, let me know in the comments below what your favorite book by him is. So the project of this book is not terribly unique, and what I mean by that is that this is about kids with special abilities, in this case telepathy and telekinesis, that are kidnapped and swept away to a special school of sorts that is called the Institute, where those skills are used and honed for very specific purposes. Now, if you have seen things like X-Men or Stranger Things, you might be saying, I've seen that done before, not interested. But Stephen King does a good job of giving this book a flavor all its own. Now, when you first start this book, you might think, Brooke, this has nothing to do with special kids at a school where they're stowed away in Maine, away from the rest of the world, because the first 40 pages are about a guy named Tim who is recently released from his job as a police officer, who is going on a journey to try to figure out what he's supposed to do next in life, what he's going to do to pay the bills. And after being derailed from his original plan to go to New York, he ends up in a small town called DePray, South Carolina, where he becomes a night knocker. His chapter is important, so if you can get through it, 40 pages in, you get into the real meat of the book, which is where you meet a character whose name is Luke Ellis. And Luke is a special kid in that he is 12, but he is so advanced, his school, where he's a scholarship student, has helped him apply for dual enrollment at Emerson and MIT because he wants to study the humanities and STEM. And he's so wildly smart that even at 12, they both let him in. You are really made to believe that he is deserving of that kind of treatment because the vocabulary Stephen King instills upon him is not the vocab that a regular 12-year-old would use, or certainly not that I used. There are a lot of facts and things like that are sprinkled in that no normal 12-year-old would know, and he just spouts them out effortlessly and makes you realize, okay, yeah, this kid is worthy of all this praise. In addition to being a genius, he is also capable of moving things with his mind. He can't like cause a whirlwind, he couldn't knock you out if he needed to defend himself, but sometimes if he's mad, a door might slam or papers might float away, that kind of thing. He can't really control it, it just happens when it happens. Now, he is swept away in the middle of the night by kidnappers, and he is taken to the Institute, which is in Maine, but he doesn't know where it is. He just knows that when he wakes up, he is in a room that looks just like his room at home. But he knows that something isn't quite right. His memories of the night before are fuzzy, he thinks he had a bad dream, and then he realizes, oh shit, I'm not in Kansas anymore. Walks down the hall, meets a kid named Kalisha who gives him the inside scoop and says, hey, we are in a place that we call the front half. All I know that I can tell you is that this is the part of the facility where you will meet other kids that also have special abilities. They are telepathic or telekinetic. We are given shots. We are treated like science experiments. We don't exactly know why they're doing these things to us. All I can say is that if you behave, you go along with it, they will give you tokens for the vending machine where you can get everything from candy cigarettes to actual booze, despite the fact that we're all children. Or if you misbehave, they will knock the crap out of you with tasers that we call zap sticks, and they will make your life a living hell. So you can either go along with them or you can cause trouble. Either way, this is not an ideal situation for you, but we're doing the best we can, and as kids stick together, I'll introduce you to the others. And then she also lets him know that there's a place called the back half where kids go after they've been in the front half, usually for a couple of weeks. After you're sent to the back half, we never hear from you again. I don't know what happens. I'm the kid that's been here the longest, and I'm afraid I'm gonna be sent to back half soon. So he meets these kids and he sort of starts to get involved in institute life, and like everyone else, he is turned into a human pincushion because they are injecting all kinds of things into him that give him headaches and make him feel bad, but also maybe increase his abilities. And the book goes on from there. There are a couple of things that I absolutely loved about this book. So one of them is that there are a lot of Easter eggs where Stephen King references his other books. So there is a line here that talks about how someone is the author of everyone else's misery. Well, Stephen King is an author that wrote a book called Misery. So I thought that was fun. There is also a section of the book where you see two twins walking down the hall, and the main character thinks that it reminds him of a scary movie that he's seen before. And of course, they are referencing the movie The Shining with Jack Nicholson. So I loved all of those, but again, I haven't read a lot of his work, so there were probably a ton of them that I didn't pick up on. Another thing that I loved about this book was the kids. Now, normally I don't love child narrators, and they get under my skin, and I will DNF a book because I don't want to deal with them anymore. But in this book, Stephen King pairs the heavy emphasis on children with a third-person point of view perspective. So you're not in a child's mind the whole time. He jumps around. Sometimes you are hearing the thoughts of Miss Sigby, who oversees the institute and makes sure that everything runs to her liking. Sometimes you are in the heads of caretakers that are justifying their behavior towards these kids in different ways. And then other times you are with the children. And he does a really good job of making these kids sympathetic characters. Yes, they're kids. Yes, sometimes they do annoying things, or, you know, you're ready to move on from their perspective. But at the end of the day, they are lovable kids that are in a difficult situation. They're away from their families. They're making the best of it by creating a found family amongst themselves, and you really feel for them. In particular, there's one kid named Avery Dixon who is 10 years old, but they talk about Avery as though he acts more like he is 5 or so. And because he is really traumatized by being taken from his family, he'll curl up at night with different kids from the institute and you really just want to like reach into the book and take this kid home with you and give him a safe place to be. But he's interesting because despite the fact that he's the most childish of them, he's also the most powerful, and they know that ultimately, if anyone can save them, it's probably going to be him using his abilities to get them out. So I loved the kids in this book. Stephen King made me really care for them and made their voices much less grating than I have seen with children elsewhere. Another thing that I love about this book is the information about the reason for the institute. I won't get into that because of spoilers, but basically all of these people that are on board for running the institute are complicit in really terrible things. They are basically using up these kids until they wither away and treating them like objects or slaves instead of human beings. The reason that the institute runs is a reason strong enough that they feel that they are doing good, even though they are doing things that are definitely going to get them sent straight to hell. And there are certain characters in particular, like a caretaker named Maureen, that you see really struggle with what they're doing. And she is interesting because Maureen is sick. She has a terminal illness. She's at the end of her life, and she develops a relationship with Luke that makes her realize, you know, I am in the wrong here, and if I am going to be spared when I die, I need to put right what I've done, if that's even possible. So she is enlisted to help these kids, and you see her relationship with them really change who she is as a person. And I thought that that was really interesting personal growth to watch, whereas some of the other characters don't have that. And you can see why some of them are so hardened, because a lot of the people that are recruited to work on the staff for the institute are former military, former contract security people that are used to being in extreme situations and doing things that are protocol that in the regular world would not fly because they're so brutal or difficult, but in the case of the institute make sense to them. They're used to being on government payroll. They're used to doing things that they can't talk about. So why not do them here, have special benefits, be taken care of for life, I guess. So you can sort of believe the motivations of a lot of these people, even though I would never pardon them for what they do. Let's talk about what I didn't like about this book. So most of this is set in Maine, but the chapters that are in Dupre, South Carolina are really frustrating because Stephen King uses terrible, heavy-handed Southern dialect and makes all of the characters in Dupre, South Carolina look like country bumpkins. Now, when he sets up Dupre, he basically says, like, the movie theater has been closed for years, there's only a stoplight, there's nothing to do, you know, the train comes through town and we have a warehouse, you can work there, or the sheriff's office, but that's about it. Everybody knows everybody's business, there's not a lot going on. I live in the South, in North Carolina. I have been to small rural towns in South Carolina, and people do not speak the way that Stephen King has them speaking in this book. So it might just be my Southern bias, but that really rubs me the wrong way, and I was glad that you only saw that a little bit at the beginning of the book and one or two other sections later on, because otherwise I would not have been able to get through 550 plus pages of that kind of speech. So another thing that I didn't love about this book is the pacing. It is a chunker, again, over 550 pages, but there is a lot of scenes where people are just hanging out, and I felt like Stephen King could have trimmed some of that fat. I realize that you have to see the kids together interacting so that you get to know who they are as individuals, so that you get to understand the importance of their bond and how that bond will lead them to sacrifice or not sacrifice certain things for the good of all of them. But I felt like some of those hanging out scenes where they're just on the playground chatting between themselves could have either been cut out entirely or significantly whittled down. And then the other thing that I didn't like is that Stephen King has way too many named characters. Now, I realize that with the Institute, you would have to have a ton of people working to make that a successful operation, right? You have to have security guards, you have to have janitors, you have to have chefs, you have to have doctors that are going to be running these experiments, you have to have administrators. I get that there have to be a ton of people, but Stephen King names way too many of those caretakers individually. He names too many of the doctors individually. And so there's a certain point in the book where they all just ran together, and I thought, I can't keep track of who is important and who isn't. And I don't really want to have to take notes about who each person is that I have to reference to be able to keep up with all of that. But that might just be because I'm in my 30s and I need some ginkgo biloba because my memory is shit. I don't know, you tell me. One last thing to go with the abundance of characters, there are also some characters that have similar names, and there is a scene where there's a Tom and a Tim. Those names are way too close for those two people to be interacting because my brain kept thinking, okay, which is which? And it was taking me out of the story. It was hard to focus on who was doing what, and I didn't love that. So those are my overall thoughts on The Institute by Stephen King. I think that if you're someone that's interested in horror or sci-fi, or where those two things can intersect, that this is definitely something that you should pick up. I don't think that this is particularly scary, even though they are doing some pretty terrible things to kids. It's not going to keep you up at night, but there are some really fast-paced action scenes at the end that were nail-biters for me. So if you like a good action scene, check this out, you'll like it. I have one more thing to say about this book, but it's definitely in spoiler territory. So if you have not yet read this and you want to, I would maybe click off now. Last chance. So my problem with this book is that I think that there is a glaring plot flaw, and it has to do with the computers that are in the kid's room. Luke has a laptop, and if he has one of those coins that he gets for special behavior, he can use it to activate the internet. And obviously the Institute is trying to contain these kids, so they block any websites that have anything to do with social media or email so that they can't contact the outside world. And then they also block news sources so that they can't find out that their parents have been brutally murdered and that the kids are probably the ones that the police think are responsible, right? But because Ellis is a child genius, he knows a workaround that is basically the equivalent of accessing the dark web through a very specific route, and he is able to get to the things that they don't want him to see. Now, he says very specifically early on that he doesn't want to contact a local police office or look up local police websites because he's afraid they might be mirroring his screen, they might be monitoring what it is that he is watching. But over time, as he pushes the envelope more and more, he finds out that people probably are not watching, because if they were, they would have taken away that laptop and ended his internet access. We know that he is very motivated to escape because he eventually goes to great lengths to do that, to his own danger. So I have a hard time believing that he would not eventually try to access email or go to the news, or use something as simple as YouTube to upload a message to someone somewhere that would say, hey, these terrible atrocities are happening to kids at this place in the Institute. I know vaguely where it's located. This is how you can help us. So I thought that that was a major plot flaw with the book, and I feel like that's something that other people probably also notice. If you've read it, let me know what you think about that in the comments below. All right, so that is all that I have to say about the Institute. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Until next time, happy reading. Bye, y'all.